Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Projectworks podcast, a conversation and community for high growth consulting firm leaders about the stuff that keeps us up at night. My name is Dominique Rennell. I'm the Chief Customer Officer for Projectworks. I'd like to welcome our CEO, Mark Orttung. Hello, Mark.
Hello, great to see you.
And great to see you too. And we have a fantastic guest today, a wonderful customer of Projectworks, Christophe, who is the CEO of Marshall Day Acoustics. They are a global acoustics engineering firm winning work across 15 countries, a team of around 120 acoustic experts. So an amazing crew there. We're really proud to have you as a Projectworks customer and really happy you can join us on the podcast today talking about how a firm differentiates itself in 2026. Welcome, Christophe.
Thanks for having me, Dominique.
Great. Christophe, do you want to give a little bit of an intro to people watching?
Sure, thank you. Yes, I'm leading Marshall Day Acoustics in Australia, the operations in Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, and Perth. And my counterpart across the Tasman, Malcolm Dunn, is managing the operations in New Zealand as managing principal. Marshall Day was founded in 1981 by Christopher Day and late Sir Harold Marshall. Harold is one of the most influential figures in modern acoustical industry in the concert hall design. In particular, he established why lateral sound reflections are so important in sound design of concert halls. And in '87, Peter Fernside founded the Australian arm of Marshall Day Acoustics and championed some of our work in China and Hong Kong, where we designed concert halls for the last 20 years, which is an extraordinary legacy that I'm trying to keep with our staff. And talking about our staff, as you said, we've got 120 specialists across New Zealand, Australia, but also a small office in France. But what's important is that we are 100% employee-owned. All our shareholders are employees at Marshall Day, and if you leave Marshall Day, you need to sell your shares, which is quite a critical part of what Marshall Day is. Ultimately, what we do as acoustic consultants is that we manage sound, the wanted and the unwanted sound. On the one end, you've got the architectural side, designing concert halls, theaters, and so it sounds the way it should, but also making sure a school or a hospital is fit for purpose acoustically. And on the other end, you have the environmental noise where you assess and minimize how roads, rail, industries, and renewable energy projects affect the communities around them. Therefore, our work extends as well in defense projects. We also develop our own acoustic tools that are used by even our competition worldwide. So whether it's a world-class auditorium or a wind farm next to someone's home, the thread is always the same, is just getting the sound right for the people who experience it. And that's what we try to do every single day.
That is such a great rundown, Christophe, and such a cool niche, such a cool piece to be working on, to think that they've got so many people globally working across that. One of the things working with Projectworks is that we get to work with amazing customers that are doing really incredible work out there in consultant land, always working with different projects, some at incredible scale. And when I looked at some of the concert halls and projects you'd been doing, it was just incredible, really, really big scale projects that, working into a concert hall, I might not have thought through the full engineering background of what had to be done. So some very cool stuff. Thank you for joining us. I think it's going to be a really valuable conversation. And what we're talking about on today's podcast is how a consulting firm in this times in 2026 can truly stand apart from the crowd. We know it's really critical for ambitious consulting firms to differentiate themselves, to have a unique sales pitch or view in the world of what they deliver. And so that can really help grow, pitch everything from where to go to having a successful firm. We're going to start off with a poll, as we often do, that will come up on the screen soon. It's talking about why your clients buy from you. And the question here is, when did you last ask your clients why they buy from you? Got a couple of options here. But while people are filling that in, it would be great to know, when was the last time you checked in with your clients of why they buy with you, why they think makes you different? Mark, welcome to the podcast. I know this is a subject you've been really keen to talk about.
Yeah, it's one that I had a kind of funny experience where I had an advisor ask to do this on my behalf without me present. And the answers that came back were really not great. They basically, we thought we had a differentiated offering. We thought we were special. They basically said they're cheap and they have good people. And it's like, like, but it's good to hear it. It's good to know that that's what people are buying, and why they're buying. And so that led us on a multi-year journey to try to get ourselves to be differentiated, to stand out in the market, and to be more valuable to our clients.
It is a tricky one. I mean, it sounds slightly obvious. I think when you first start up a business, you're just so hungry for customers. Every win is a celebration. Every single job that you get, everyone is across it. And then as you get a group of customers, you have then succeeded on having this amazing pool of people that should be able to tell you exactly what makes you the reason they've bought. But often we don't. And there's many reasons we don't do that. Because it's not top of mind. We're busy doing 100 other things to grow businesses. But looking at the results that have come in, we've got 6% have said within the last month. I think that's pretty cool, but someone's hanging their hat in there. The majority at 20 or 28% split actually more than 2 years ago or 1 to 3 months ago. So there seems a broad spread across there. So I would say it looks like people who are tuning in are talking to their customer base. I guess the next thing is what are you really asking them, and what are you making sure, I guess, what information are you looking for? Which comes to sort of my first point here. Mark, I'm going to throw this to you. When you call a firm differentiated, what do you think that actually means?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Well, first off, like, how big is your sector? In the one I was in, I learned there were 10,000 firms. So how do you become something that gets name recognition and really stands out? I think you want to be the firm that people mentally associate with the solution. So I think Christophe's in a great position. I think he's got a firm that probably does have that level of differentiation. I think it's really, really hard to earn though in consulting. So yeah, get that. But basically, you want to become synonymous with that type of problem and the best answer to it, I think is what I would call real differentiation.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think the being solutions based, I mean, as consultants, we need to solve our clients' problems, and it's what is rewarding as well for us and our staff to be able to solve problems and communicate the solutions, or if something is not going to work, to communicate that with our client, and that's critical. I mean, we've made the choice to stick to our core business, acoustics and vibration. We are now one of the very few in our market who are not owned by a larger firm, like a big multidisciplinaries. A lot of our competitors end up being bought out and just amalgamated into bigger firms. But I think that's really where we leverage, I suppose, our differentiation is by being experts in our field and not just going down different routes and just diluting, I suppose, the expertise that we provide to our clients.
Yes, I like that. And talk me through that, Christophe. What do you think that really unlocks for you? Having that really clear view of what business you are hunting or winning, or what makes your team really successful. What do you think that unlocks for you as a business, from like pricing and sales to the kind of customers that you attract?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Ultimately, when you pitch yourself where we are in the market, we tend to be more expensive than our competitors, and in a way that's it's something that we need to accept, but also make sure that we provide the value add to the client, and that's why if you want something that's just cookie cutter or just just box ticking, we might not be the firm to go to, because we're not really going to provide you that value add. There's no value add to be provided. But when there is a problem, when there is complaints from residents, or when there is a challenging project, then I suppose our reputation precedes us, and usually client would come to us directly, because they know that we can solve their problem efficiently.
I think there's real power if you guys get a request and it's not going to be value add. If you say effectively, look, we're not the people because this is a pretty cookie cutter project. The long-term benefit of that, I think, is amazing. If that sort of gets out on the market that, you guys actually just said, look, we could charge you, we could do this, but you're going to get better value elsewhere, then I think it does really help build that brand.
I agree. And I think that comes down to a piece of, I think there's a fear in narrowing down. I think people feel like it's shrinking your market when you say no to work potentially, especially when you've come out of like a high growth. When you're first starting up, you're really trying to find your niche. You're saying yes to everything. You're figuring that out to then say, okay, we're not going to bid on this work anymore, or we're going to be very clear that before we do a no go in an RFP or an opportunity, we're really going to evaluate it from these factors. But I think it actually can help you grow faster for some of those reasons that you spoke about, Christophe. You've got, when it comes to it, you've got those skills and those people that are able to solve those challenges. Otherwise, you sort of wasting that talent internally by working on jobs that potentially are not filled with that. And you're right, Mark, I think it kind of builds up that trusted pair of hands if that's what you want to be seen as in the market, because what you'd hope, I guess, people say is like, oh, we'll just go and ask them anyway, because they'll refer you to someone. They'll either take the job or they'll find the right person for it. So you want customers coming and talking to you, especially if you have a high portion of your work and portfolio as incumbent business. You want people to not hesitate to ask you if this is the right job for you.
That's right. Yeah. And quite often when we've got, a small inquiry, we would just, redirect clients to other firms that we know can deliver the job more cost effectively for what they need. I mean, it's just, there is a room for everyone. And as a bigger firm, I suppose we tend to be more expensive than a one-man band, for example, which would be perfectly suited to deal with those smaller projects and deal with a resident who's got an issue with the air conditioning unit from its neighbor, for example.
Spot on. Now, something you said just before, Mark, you said when you went out many months ago to a consultant and going out within that particular business you're in, they said I think it was cost and people, you said it was. Yeah. And I think almost every firm, or many consultancy firms, because that's what we're selling, people and time, says our people are our differentiator. Is there any version where you think talent becomes that real edge? And what would have to be true?
What I think, there is a version, but I agree with you. I think every consulting firm, you can look at their websites and they're all boiled down to like, you have a problem, we're smart, we'll solve your problem is sort of what their homepages say. But I do think one of the things that happened for us when we got very focused was we stopped hiring for the project. So when we would take whatever random technology project somebody needed done, we would have to go find a contractor that knew that random technology and could be an expert in it. And we'd hire them for that project. And then they'd probably be a contractor and they'd probably go away. Once we committed, like we're just going to do great experiences in custom software, then we were hiring to our company or to our practice and not to this job. So we wanted to find the right long-term person, and you can actually hire, I think, higher quality talent when you can attract them into, you're going to join this firm, you're going to be with us for the long run. This is what we do. It's what you're really good at. And I do think it then begins to build a community of like-minded people, and they're really passionate about the same thing. That, I think, does make your team differentiated, but only because you're sort of committed to the team being together, and they, as a group, get better and better together.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, ultimately for us, attracting and retaining talent is critical, because it is our people that makes Marshall Day what it is. And ultimately, our culture at Marshall Day is a key differentiator. We all work as a team, and there's a lot of sharing of information, sharing of knowledge. It's not, just putting the ego aside. And if you've got a new project that comes in, for example, like being expert witness for a project. And if there's an opportunity for someone younger to be able to get a shot at it, it's fantastic. It's not about just always keeping it to the top of the ladder to just and not give those opportunities down. It's quite critical.
Yeah, I also think within a consultancy, having a way that you work with your customer and that your people follow a similar way, essentially like a one best way. I think often, again, if you have a portion of your portfolio being repeat business, so multiple jobs from different companies coming in, I think people will come back because they liked the experience they had working with that consultancy before. I trust them to do the work. I know that they'll do what they say they do. I know they'll let me know if there's a problem. And so sometimes the way that you work and roll that out to your people can be a differentiator. So I like to work with this agency because I know they always give me updates in the same format on a Friday, no matter who I'm working with, if it's this person or this person, that I always have visibility to the exec team, that I, whatever that is, that every job that they do, even if they have a slightly different team, is a consistent experience. Because I think often in consultancies, they're like, oh, I really want to go back. I want to make sure that Kelly's on my team, or whoever it was that they liked last time. It's because they liked that experience that they had working with that person. So I think rolling that out can, help you be a leader of the pack in that way. But you've got to get it right there. Now, before I move on to the next section, I've got a couple of other notes around here. There's some questions I wanted to get to in the chat. One for you, Christophe. Someone has asked, is everyone at Marshall Day an employee shareholder or only a subset?
No, it's only a subset, but I think from memory, it would be at least 25%, 20 to 25% of staff that would be shareholders in the business.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's such a cool experience for people working for an organization that they really feel like they've got, and they're in the game and for the success.
Yeah,
that's very
exactly.
Cool. And we've had another comment here from Candace saying mentoring new consultants by experienced consultants with clients helps the stability and giving client assurance of service. Couldn't agree more. I think it's really about making sure that your customers feel like they're getting the experience from your company and your brand, and that you've got fantastic people within that, but that it's not hanging within one person, because not only is that a big risk for your consultancy, it's also a really big risk for that person, because then they become the only person that people want to work with, and they might sometimes get stuck on accounts they don't always love. We know we've been there before. So I want to talk a little bit around differentiation as the market shifts, including the AI era. We cannot escape that. That is here, and that is changing how things can be differentiated. So say a firm nails its differentiation. How long do you think that edge actually lasts before it erodes? Which another way you could flip it is, how often do you really need to check in that this is still a differentiation for you in the market?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think it varies by the sector. I think Christophe has built just a fantastic differentiation, which I suspect will last a long time. I think in some of the sectors like software, where they're building a differentiation around application of AI or automation of business process, those differentiations might only last 6 months or a year today. So I think there's like a constant reinvention required in some disciplines. I'm curious, Christophe, if you agree, or where you come out on that.
Yeah, no, look, I agree. Ultimately, it is very important to be able to, when there's a new field, I suppose, opening up, renewable energy was quite a critical one for us. It's very important to, if you can, to become the expert in the field and be recognized as such. But you have to be very careful that you don't put all your eggs in that same basket as well, because we've seen it so many times, at least in Australia, where changes in political sort of or political changes affect a particular industry, and then if you're just relying too much on this particular field, then you can end up in trouble. Therefore, I think diversifying is important, but also just something new comes in. Can I be the expert in that field? And that's what we've done. For example, on now we've got a lot of utility scale batteries coming up and a big part of what we do. And it wasn't just, oh, well, let's do it, the same way as we've done everything else. We just want to be the expert in there, and that people can rely on our knowledge to add value to the project.
Some great insights there. I think that's so true. And I think sometimes there are some warning signs of what has set you apart before has quietly become table stakes. I think, you pointed out a few there, Christophe. You can have a look through of people sort of thinking, oh, this is a new piece, and suddenly we're the people that can talk about that with confidence, and then other people quickly catch up, or it's not such a required niche anymore around that. And I think AI is collapsing a lot of what firms used to charge for, the research or first drafts. I would be curious to think, or get your opinion from both of you, is do you think AI is beginning to erase some of that differentiation, or is it exposing, some of what people thought was a differentiation that is now an easy thing to automate?
There's no doubt that whatever differentiation you may have had is at risk, I would say, from AI. And it's really changing. A lot of firms would move up the value chain. So if you're building something, you often would move up the value chain by doing the market research, doing the strategy, doing the planning. And a lot of that work is getting compressed, I feel like. I still think that at the core of consulting, people are buying from a firm they trust, that expertise is helping them make sure they're getting to the right answer. And that is still there, but the amount of work you need to do and the amount of work that you can charge for is probably smaller in some of those research steps and some of those early definitional pieces of consulting. And I think that clients are definitely pushing on consulting firms to say, hey, I know you can use AI. I know you can do this in a smaller part of time than you used to. What kind of discount are you going to give me? I've even heard of people prescribing their discount. So, but I do think, like most technology waves, AI creates more things you can do than it takes away. So the challenge is you got to move fast, you got to keep reinventing, and you got to add to the differentiation you have and keep moving up that value chain because it's moving fast and the market moves really quickly now.
Yeah. Well, I think stuff is leaving and he's going to try and join again.
Okay. Yeah,
He's
I
going
was
to work
just going to
through some
say a
technical
couple.
difficulties.
Earlier you were asking sort of how do you know if what is the length of differentiation for a specialty, and then how do you know? We looked for a few signs that, so first off, we wanted to be doing something that the giant firms were not doing, was a way. And then you sort of like, well, are we doing something that nobody cares about? So we wanted to get customers and prospects to give us feedback in small groups to say, yes, we need this solution. And so we were doing something that we knew was valuable, and we knew the giant firms in our space were not yet doing. The next step was sort of trying to convince the analysts that this was what's coming next. And then fairly quickly, the giant firms jump on board. And so I felt like when the giant firms in our space jumped on board, that was like, okay, the mainstream is here. We are no longer differentiated. And so either
Yeah.
the giant firms want to buy smaller firms, so either you have to get acquired or you have to reinvent and go find with your customers something else that they really value that the giant firms are not yet doing. And so that cycle used to be a few years in software. I think it's 6 months or a year now.
In terms of AI, I mean, for our work, we tend to have to analyze a lot of data, and using AI for that purpose is very useful. It just really allows us to do it very efficiently. But the QA checks is what is becoming critical, because AI can get it wrong and does get it wrong. And definitely, I'm not really feeling too worried about my job as a consultant, because you still need to interpret that data and you still need to communicate that to the client. And so far, when you look at the type of reporting that AI would do, it's still not there. And again, those errors are still there as well. Therefore, you need to be extremely vigilant. One of the biggest problems for us as well is that we're starting to see clients with clauses in their contracts that you shall not use AI. Therefore, we need to be very careful about how we implement AI in our day-to-day work to not be in breach of those contracts. When we do work for courts, for example, as an expert, there are often clauses as well where either you need to advise when AI has been used and how, but also some of them where you can only do it if you get leave from the court to do it. Therefore, we need to be extremely careful on how we implement it and making sure that we just keep that expertise in the background, not in the background, in the foreground, ultimately, and keep AI in the background. But AI is very useful for us to, in terms of the coding for our innovation and development is, makes things so much easier and faster.
I agree. And I think when we look at some of the stats we've spoken about in earlier podcasts around growth, there were some, quite cool stats that globally in consulting, essentially the amount of jobs that consultancies are having to bid for have increased, and the amount of the value of jobs has gone down. So you're having to quote more for smaller jobs more often. So the productivity that AI can provide from that should enable to run fast. There's a bit of like, that's how the market now wants to buy. They're more likely to cut up large jobs into smaller chunks. So that can help, how do you do that within your consultancy? That takes more time. That takes more time of your sales team, your delivery leads, and using AI to be able to automate that means that you could probably get across more jobs. So there's lots of opportunities to sort of move faster without it potentially totally flipping what your differentiation is. And I think also, it still comes down to people and consultancies. We were just talking about how do you get away from saying we have the best people as a differentiator, but that's because essentially people still like to work with people to get these jobs done, especially when they've got quite niche expertise in their field. Moving away,
couldn't agree more.
Great. Moving away from that a little bit, I want to talk about, so say you do have a really sharp position, you actually get in front of the market. How does that change as you grow? So in the early days, the marketing basically is the founder, as we know, the expertise, the network, their reputation, often the differentiation is that person. At what point does that founder as marketing stop scaling? If you look at that, if you are a founder and you're starting to build your team, maybe you're sort of now the 20 people, 30 people, how do you move away from that being the differentiator, being you?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question and a problem I suppose we had to deal with as our founders are starting to just retire and move out of the business. We're still lucky that at least both Christopher Day and Peter Fernson are still involved in the periphery and still contributing to the business. But ultimately, a founder can be the brand right up until they can't be in every room, and that's critical. And that's also what we are hearing from our clients is that they tend to know and deal with certain people that they used to deal with, but don't necessarily know others within the company. And there's something that we need to work through to make sure that Marshall Day is not just at one person, because as we said before, it puts a lot of pressure on that person. If you want to go on leave or anything else, you need to know that your project's going to be looked after. Your client needs to know that they will get the same service as they will get from that person. But ultimately, sometimes, and founders can be champions in certain areas, and you need to also accept that you may not get another champion in a particular field to just take over from the founder, and how you pivot from that is also quite critical.
Yeah, I think it's so critical to develop a methodology, which is kind of boring and a boring word, but or a playbook, right? Of this is how we how we have always done work. It comes from the founder. It's sort of developed by them, but then over time it's developed by the company, and it gets to be, I think, how all great sort of scalable franchises, they may not have it explicit, but they have at their core a methodology or a playbook that they use to give that consistent experience over hundreds or thousands of brand interaction points. And I think a consultancy has to do the same thing. You got to figure out what is your playbook and what's the best way to capture it and the best way to get your people to be really conversant in it and excellent at delivering. And then your customers over time will be buying that playbook, not just from this one or two founder firm.
Agree. And I think sometimes at that point, I mean, often they can, but sometimes the founder isn't always crystal clear on what their magic is. It's like, oh, they just connect with people, or they just are really good at talking about the subject, or, they're really good at sales, are the sort of things you hear. Where I think, coming back to that poll, really important to talk to your customer base. If you're at that point of scaling, that you've got a bunch of customers, you've got a really strong founder proposition, and that's sort of your magic of closing the deals is often sending in the founder. Then it's really important to go back and talk to those customers. What was it? Did they just talk really passionately about that subject? Did they come across as a subject matter expert? Was there a way that they explained things or came across that your other competitors didn't? I think it's important to go back and look at that external point of view, because that's when you really do need to bring that back into your playbook, and having your people, or at least your core sort of delivery leads, singing from that same song sheet. They need to know what they need to replicate when they're going into those sales cycles to stand out in the market. What do you think when if someone's listening and they're at that stage, what is the first thing that they should really be building in that playbook? Or, case studies, positioning, having a, what is it, the elevator pitch that someone says at a barbecue of like, what does your company do? What do you think is the first thing that they should be building in that playbook?
Yeah, I think having a clear understanding of what the company does, and what and the wealth of offerings that the company can provide, I think, is quite important. And having that first opening line, I suppose, just make it so much easier to start a conversation, break the ice, when you're just networking event or anything else. But to me, what is critical is to have people shadowing those experts or those founders in their, in meetings, in networking events, just to see and try to get, sort of that the vibe, I suppose, of what they're bringing to the table. Not necessarily always to be able to replicate it, because obviously, each individual have got their own way of doing things, but just trying to understand how they interact and what makes them successful in what they've done.
Yeah, I agree with you, Christophe, and I would maybe add on to that. The founder probably isn't the right person to build the playbook. In many cases, they're the one that's out inventing, they're pushing the envelope, but they're probably, not always, but they're probably not as interested in like, let's build a machine that makes this repeatable. And so quite often it is someone else that's going to do that. And then to your question, Dom, on where would you start? I would go look for which engagements were most profitable or most successful, or which engagements had the highest customer satisfaction, and say, let's go there first. Let's build a playbook for that, and then keep adding to that more and more as you expand it out.
Yeah, the salesperson in me loves that point of view, Mark, because I also think when you're scaling, I think I referred to this earlier in the podcast, you sort of say yes to everything. Yes, we'll take that job. Yes, we'll quote on that. And it's important to take a line in the stand of like, this is what differentiates us, and these are the jobs that are best suited for us. And that can really give you a good view of what essentially your total addressable market is. Who are you going after? What can you think that you can go after for that year? Because the next step is, once you've decided what you think your differentiation is testing it. If you think this is what's going to win you the jobs, and you can get a list of these here 100 accounts or opportunities in my market, then you can go at it and test that. And if you are getting a high hit rate on that, people are really interested in talking to you, your message resonating, then you might have nailed it. You might have a really clear differentiation. If you do that and get this list and people are not taking your meetings, or your pitches are not landing, then you need to go back to the drawing board a little bit and be like, maybe we haven't quite got that there. And often that is what helps accelerate a business, when they really get that quite crystal clear, because then you're spending the time pitching to the right people, and you know what to say no to when an opportunity comes your way that you just don't think is the right fit. Which comes back to what we were saying earlier about, knowing when to say no and passing that on to someone else can also build that credibility. So as it's already 5 past the top of the hour. So as we're actually moving in, we've got 10 more minutes. For any consultancy firm leaders listening, how would they truly know they're differentiated? I just spoke to that a little bit about winning deals. That could be, but if you think this is what's going to help you and you're landing and your conversion's really high, that's always an easy one to point to. What else might they see that is an indication that they've truly differentiated their business?
I think one good sign is that work is finding them rather than, they have to go out and find every new client. Like if you've got prospective clients coming and saying, so-and-so referred us, or we heard you were the ones we need to talk to solve this problem, it's a great indicator. Sort of the market knows that you're somebody to go talk to about it. So that'd be one sign, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. I think repeat customers and referrals are critical, and you can really see as well where you're again where you can leverage your expertise, I suppose, and then where you dominate the market, I suppose. But again, going back to what the poll ultimately that you sent at the start, it's about asking your clients, not just asking the clients about the good stuff, because it's easy to ask for the good clients, why they like you is a good thing to know, but it's somewhat easy. It's also talking to the clients where you just have lost a bid, for example. Well, why did we lose that bid? Or if you know that something wrong happened in a job, just ask, how can we do better? How can we can build that trust? Or if you make a mistake, because it happens, it happens to everyone, just own up to it. And I've seen that many times where you just go to the client, proactively own up to your mistakes. And we've just seen, that it builds trust, and clients just come back because they know that they can trust you, that you're going to help them out. And if there's an error made, you will fix it. And it's quite important.
Yeah, I agree. I've experienced that firsthand as well, Christophe. I think that's sort of, I guess, building trust with customers is just so important, especially for, ongoing relationships and incumbent business. Really important there. Okay, another takeaway. If someone's listening and they're kind of thinking, well, maybe I'm not as differentiated as I hoped I would be, what's something that they could do this week to help move them forward in that space? Christophe, you just gave a great idea about like potentially looking back at some deals that you have lost or that you haven't been so successful in, and picking up the phone and asking for a bit of feedback there. Sometimes after a little bit of time has passed, you often get some more honest feedback than you would straight after the pitch. Any other ideas of what people could do tomorrow to help move them forward?
One thing I like to do is go out to prospective customers and current customers and ask what are their really hard problems. They often have problems that they're sitting on that they just assume you couldn't solve for them and nobody could solve for them. But if you can sort of develop a list of really hard challenges for your clients, and then actually come up with a way to solve them, I think that would push you into that territory of you're now doing something that hopefully nobody else is doing, and you're out ahead of the market again. So yeah, ask where does it hurt? What keeps you up at night to your clients?
It's a great one. I also think asking your internal people, what do you think our value proposition is? What do you think makes us different? I think you often, especially in those early days, you'll get quite different answers from lots of different people, and that can give you a view because, especially in consulting firms, your people are the one talking to your potential customers and your prospects. That's, they're out there. So that's the message that they're conveying. So do you think that's on point? Do you think there's some internal messaging you can do to make sure that people are singing from the same song sheet and that the right messages are out there into the market?
I really like that idea of asking your people. I would take it one step further and ask your people, what should our clients be buying from us that they're not? Because your people, they're in the client environment, they know what's going on, they really understand those businesses, and they often have thoughts that they keep to themselves. It's like just trying to get some of that to come out. And like, what should they be buying from us?
Yeah.
What's the real problem that we could solve? It would be interesting.
Yeah, agree. And innovation, I think, is a key differentiator for that as well. And going back to, asking your staff, how do you think we could innovate in how we do things? Can we do things better, more efficiently? Can we develop tools that we can use and then potentially end up selling those tools? I mean, that's what we found for some of the tools that we've developed as well. But also, those, as you said, those clients that, here's a problem that you've got. Well, let's just work together and try to innovate in that field and try to see maybe there is a different way to deal with that problem than how it's been done forever.
And that's a nice, actually, a nice wrap for a question that's come up here. It says, does differentiation equal niche? It's difficult for small markets to stand out for just one thing. So thus diversification must be or may be necessary. So how do you differentiate and diversify? And you actually just spoke to that really nicely there, Christophe, about potentially, talking to your people, talking to your customers, but also what do they think? If you, especially talking to your people, what else do you think they could be helping their customers with? Often you'll be like, oh, if we had X, Y, and Z, oh, absolutely, I think my customers would take that, buy that, consume that sort of product or service from us. So I think, again, that's so right, niche and differentiation. But I think really often your people have some pretty good insights of what your customers would be wanting more to see more from of you. A bit of a final question here, and this is a big one because everyone's looking for this answer. So if you've got it, it's $1 million one. But in 5 years' time, in a world where AI is everywhere, what firm do you think is going to win? What do you think will really make a differentiation for you in the consulting field?
Well, I really think that it still remains the human factor. AI is going to be good for the again, as I said, the grunt work, try to analyze things, analyze for us audio signal and just pick out whether you can hear some insects or a factory or anything like this. I mean, AI would be fantastic for that and doing very quickly. But ultimately, you need the human to interpret and communicate that to clients and residents. I mean, when you're in a community consultation, facing angry residents, you just don't have AI is going to be totally useless for you. You will need to be able to speak, to think on your feet and just speak clearly and explain clearly what the potential, try to understand the issues that the residents have and try to explain to them what you're going to do about it. Is critical. Therefore, to me, accountability and judgment from a human being is going to be critical to leverage, the grunt work that AI would deliver in our field anyway.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's really crisp. I maybe just add to that the firms that really get good at learning and adopting and innovating are going to be the ones that win. So it's all about trying things, learning from things that don't work, proving out, testing, and just constantly innovating. Because I think the world's going to keep changing at a faster and faster pace. So learning is key.
And I think probably even more of a reason to understand what your differentiation is in the market, because AI should help you get there quicker. Essentially, it should still be what you deliver to your customers. And if you're quite clear on what that value proposition is, then it should just mean you should go faster and do that at a quicker pace rather than being pulled in different directions around there. So I think that sort of leads to stronger, it strengthens the case even more to be really crystal on what makes you stand out for your customers. That's it, guys. That's it. We've reached our 45-minute mark. Thank you so much, Christophe, for joining us. Marshall Day Acoustics doing some really amazing things across the globe. A very cool value proposition, and it's been lovely talking with you today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Dominique. Thanks, Mark. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on the podcast. You can find all three of us on LinkedIn if you'd love to connect. And make sure to subscribe to the Projectworks podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for joining today, and we hope to see you then.